Okay, so picture this. Years before he died, the Prophet Muhammad is standing on Mount Uhud with his closest friends. All of a sudden, the mountain starts to shake, and he says these words that would become a prophecy that followed one of those men for the rest of his life. That man was Umar ibn al-Khattab. And this, right here, is the story of how that incredible prophecy finally came true.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving deep into the final dramatic days of one of the most powerful leaders in history. And let me tell you, this isn't just a simple assassination story. Oh no, this is a story about empires colliding, about a deeply personal grudge, and about a destiny that was set in stone years earlier on top of a trembling mountain.
So for the rest of his life, Umar just couldn't shake those words. He knew deep down that he was one of those two martyrs from the prophecy. So what does he do? During his time as Caliph, he starts praying for a very specific kind of death. He wanted martyrdom, but not on some far-off battlefield. No, he prayed to die as a martyr right in the Prophet's own city, Medina.
Now, here's what's so wild about this. It seemed impossible. His friends would look at him confused and ask, how could you possibly be martyred here? The big wars are done. Medina is literally the safest city on earth. But Umar's faith, it was rock solid. He'd just say, if Allah wills it, it will happen. End of story.
All right, to really get why Umar's death was such a seismic event, you have to understand the sheer scale of the empire he had built. We're not talking about just another kingdom here. This was, without a doubt, the world's undisputed superpower, an empire bigger than anything anyone had ever seen before.
Let's try to put this into perspective, okay? We're talking about a massive territory stretching all the way from North Africa to the borders of China. It completely dwarfed the empires of guys like Alexander the Great and Julius Caesar. But the real jaw-dropper, the most unbelievable part, his caliphate had managed to conquer and completely swallow the mighty Persian Empire, a civilization that had been around for 800 years. Just gone.
So, backed into a corner, the defeated Persian emperor makes one last, desperate plea. He sends out a final call to arms to his people, basically saying it's now or never. And that was the spark that lit the fuse for one last gigantic battle. A battle that, in its aftermath, would bring two very different men to Medina, and in doing so, would seal Umar's fate forever.
And so, after that final, decisive defeat of the Persians, two really high-profile captives are brought to the capital, Medina. Little did they know they were about to play the starring roles in the end of an entire era.
Okay, so the first guy is Hormuzan. And listen, this wasn't just some random soldier. This was a top Persian general, the chief of the army, a guy famous for his brilliant strategic mind. So you can imagine, when he's finally captured and dragged in front of Umar, he's thinking, well, this is it, I'm a dead man. But Hormuzan was incredibly clever. As he's standing there facing his execution, he asks for a cup of water. Simple request, right? But then he gets Omar to promise not to kill him until he's finished drinking it. Omar says, sure, you have my word. So what does Hormuzan do? He takes the cup and throws the water on the ground. Just like that, he'd saved his own skin by outsmarting the most powerful man on the planet. Now, you'd think Umar would be furious, right? But he wasn't. He was actually impressed. He saw just how valuable a mind like that could be. And in this unbelievable twist of fate, Umar not only pardons Hormuzan, but makes him a key advisor on all things Persia. He basically just welcomed one of the masterminds of his own assassination into his inner circle. You can't make this stuff up. All right, that brings us to the second captive, a man named Firuz, who you might also hear called Abu Lulu. Now, he wasn't a general or a politician. He was a master craftsman, a truly brilliant blacksmith. And while Hormuzan used his wits to survive and even thrive, Firuz was just consumed by this deep, simmering hatred for the Arabs who had destroyed his homeland.
You know, that kind of simmering rage just needs a tiny spark to explode into a wildfire. And for Firuz, that spark came from a seemingly small personal argument, an argument that brought him face to face with the Caliph, Umar himself. So Firuz goes to Umar with a complaint. It's about his job. His master was taxing him 2 dirhams, 2 silver coins a day from his pay, and he was convinced it was totally unfair. Umar listens patiently, asks him what kind of work he does, and after hearing about his incredible skills as a craftsman, he rules that, yeah, the tax seems pretty fair. Case closed. Or so he thought.
Well, Feiruz just storms off, absolutely furious. A couple of days go by, and Umar sees him in the marketplace. He tries to, smooth things over, and he asks him, kind of jokingly, "Hey, I hear you build fantastic mills. How about you make one for me?" Feiruz just stares at him, his face like stone, and replies with this chilling, veiled threat. "Oh, I will make a mill for you, one that the whole world will remember."
And Umar knew. He knew exactly what that meant. He turned to the people with him and said, "That man just threatened to kill me." And yet, he did nothing. Why? It's incredible. Because according to the very laws he championed, you couldn't arrest someone just for a threat, on suspicion alone. He held himself to that standard. Even as the Caliph, he was not above the law.
But let's be real here. Was this whole thing really just about a 2 dirham tax? Or was Feiruz's very personal, very public complaint just the perfect cover story for something much, much bigger?
Let's look at what the historians point to, because the plot thickens. First off, Feiruz, our angry craftsman, was seen hanging out with Hormuzan, the clever general, all the time. Then there's this. The dagger used in the attack was super unique, custom-made, and there are reports that it was seen with Hormuzan just one day before the murder. So yeah, a lot of historians are convinced this wasn't some random act of a disgruntled worker. They believe it was a calculated conspiracy by Persian loyalists, with Hormuzan pulling the strings. So whether it was a solo revenge mission or a full-blown conspiracy, the plan was officially in motion. And that prophecy, the one made all those years ago on a trembling mountain, was finally about to come true, in the quiet, peaceful moments of the dawn prayer.
Feiruz went back to his workshop to create his so-called mill, and what he made was horrifying. It was a custom dagger with a handle in the middle and a sharp, deadly blade on each end. And to make absolutely sure it would do the job, he spent the whole night soaking it in a lethal poison.
So, in the darkness before dawn, Feiruz slips into the Prophet's mosque and hides in a corner. The call to prayer sounds. Umar arrives and stands at the front to lead the congregation, and just as he begins, Feiruz lunges out of the shadows. He stabs Omar not once, not twice, but 6 times. As people rush to stop him, he thrashes wildly, wounding 9 other men before, finally, turning that poisoned dagger on himself.
When Omar finally comes to, his first thought isn't about himself or his pain. The very first question he asks is, "Who did this to me?" And when they tell him it was Feiruz, the Persian craftsman, his immediate reaction is just, wow. He says, "Praise be to Allah that my killer was not a Muslim." Can you believe that? Even in his final moments, his first concern was making sure this wasn't an internal conflict that could tear his community apart.
So as he's lying there on his deathbed, he asks them to calculate his personal debts. The number they come back with is just staggering, 86,000 dirhams. His friends are stunned. They're like, "But this is all money you gave away to the poor and to orphans from your own salary." But Omar wouldn't hear it. He was insistent. He ordered his family to sell his house after he died to pay back every single dirham.
His last wish was to be buried next to the Prophet and his dear friend Abu Bakr. But even with this final request, his humility was just on another level. He tells his son, "When you go ask Aisha for her permission, don't say the commander of the faithful is asking. Just say Umar asks. I don't want her to feel like she has to say yes just because of my title."
And then, in his very last moments, think about this. The most powerful man in the world, the ruler of a massive empire, had one final simple request. He whispered, "Take my head off this pillow and just place it on the ground. Maybe then Allah will have mercy on me." And just like that, the prophecy spoken on Mount Uhud all those years ago was finally fulfilled.